Hi, very good morning to you. It's Jim from maverickstar. I want to explain something in this video because if you can get what I'm trying to talk about here and you take it, in the information, you'll understand why corporations at the moment are going after people like myself, demonetizing us, trying to throw us out our bank accounts, causing all sorts of other troubles, which I try not to generally talk about, but there are, as you know, now attempts by organisations like the European Union, the United Nations, which are where your governments are responding to now, with being dictated by these organisations back down to your governments, which are controlling things in your country. I want to show you what they are doing at the moment to stop you accessing information in this video and on this chart that we're looking at. So I want to talk about that with you in just a very short while, but I have to explain why I want to talk to you about that. Because if you are getting information like I give and other channels at the moment on alternative media, and you don't support us, then it isn't very long before the net is pulled up out the ocean and you are in that net and you are basically about to be processed. What I mean by that is it'll be too late for you. Once all these little platforms are gone because lack of support at a critical point in time when something could have changed, the information will stop flowing, because what they're doing right now is what they've done in other areas of information, like, when we used to have really good reporters that would report honestly about topics. They're no longer there, and that's why we get junk news now from mainstream media, and a lot of the times we get propaganda. So what's happening, what these organisations are doing, they're bringing out internet regulations and stopping the democratic free people around the world share views and ideas on any matters which they so choose. Like I'm about to expose something in a few minutes for you, and once you get what I'm showing you, you'll understand what these organisations represent, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. Those three questions I'll answer for you, and it's all related to the climate stealth taxes that organisations like the United Nations are raising. And let's talk about the amount. I've talked about it before. £500 billion is what they want to raise every year, and that is coming directly from all those countries that make up the European Union and the United Nations. So basically it is coming out of your wallets. Now I want to show you why it shouldn't be being done, and I think if you put all these little pieces together, you understand why they are regulating such sites like mine. Now, we don't particularly have a lot of subscribers, but the pressure which they are putting on us clearly shows and demonstrates that, first of all, they don't support freedom of information. They don't support freedoms of right to express ideas and alternative views. And I will show you how they are going about stopping that, which I've already briefly touched on. But at the bottom line, why are organisations like the European Union and the United Nations, which are made up with countries like the ones you're living in right now, why are they doing that? And who benefits from regulating the free democratic speaking people on such subjects? Well, I'll tell you who it is. It's companies like Big Pharma and the military complex. Basically, it's corporations. So we can clearly see why our governments and organisations like the European Union and United Nations want to silence people like us. First of all, they wouldn't be able to raise £500 billion, which all these rich and elite that make up nearly 0.5% of the world's population benefit from. It's also benefiting corporations, Big Pharma, the military complex. That's, human beings don't want to cause wars. We know that, the viruses are now coming from laboratories that are being created by people and then being distributed around the world, so that we all end up, suffering what we've had to over the last few years. But it's mainly the protection for, corporations. So I want to show you something, and use your common sense here, because we're going to talk about this chart now. We're going to talk about science. I've just explained why it's important to support channels like ours, because eventually you don't get no information, you don't get no truth, and if you want to live in a world like that, then you're not far away from living in a world where you are in a prison being regulated on an alarming scale. And we do have laws which we should be making those governments adhere to and stick to, and in doing so we keep the freedoms for not just ourselves at this point in time, but selflessly for our children in the future, because we are setting up a system for our next generations which is going to lead to nothing short of slavery. And I do not say that lightly, because we are on the fringe and cusp of that being the case already. And let me just explain why I said that. It's important to explain everything for you, so that I'm not just using words and these vibrations coming out of my mouth are just meaningless. Slaves are considered to be people that have a roof over their head and are fed and clothed. You can look up in your dictionary the definition of a slave. And I ask you, there are people right now that are struggling to even get those bare necessities which are classified, for slaves to have. So we have people in this world now, a lot of people, which are living worse than slaves. And that is because people are not standing up together and doing something about it. And it starts with information, because information can give you the facts and help you understand these situations. So I want to talk about science now with you guys, and a couple of things: climate and temperature, and the historic temperature record over the last 450,000 years. And I want to begin with that black line that goes across this chart in the centre of the chart, and it's measured on the left hand column. You can see temperature, and you can see that black line is at 0. You can see that there are peaks above the 0, and we're currently on the right hand side, the 5th peak. You can see that these periods of time last around 12 to 15,000 years. Then we go back into a glacial period, which is, as you can see, when we go into the glacial period, temperatures go down for very prolonged periods of time, usually around 90,000 years, and we end up eventually at ground zero in the glacial cycle, with temperatures on average during the trough of those periods of glacial periods, where temperatures have roughly dropped from the current point which we're at now by around about 8 degrees Celsius. But what is the defining point and temperature of an interglacial, which is that warm period that we have thrived in over the last 12 to 15,000 years, and a glacial period? If you look at the temperature scale on the left hand side, you will see that the critical deciding factor that puts us in an interglacial or a glacial period is around 2 degrees Celsius. Now, the other thing, before I leave this chart and show you the next one, the other important thing is that you can see that when we go into glacial periods, you can first of all see at the right hand side, we are going into one. But you can see that when we go into glacial periods, they last around 90,000 years or thereabouts. Okay, so our climate spends more time in colder parts of the cycle than it does in the warmer parts of the cycle, and this is caused by the Milankovitch cycle, which is basically our orbit around our sun changes from a very spherical one to an almost elliptical one, and as we go further away from the sun, we have less solar heating, and therefore our planet spends less time in warmer regions where it's normally accustomed to, and we get callings, or technically we get interglacials and glacial cycles. Now remember, the important factor was 2 degrees. That's what makes us either in an interglacial or a glacial period. And you can see that we spend very little time going up 2 degrees than what time we spend around about an average of 4 to 5 minus degrees Celsius. So those are the important things that I want to draw out of this. You can also see that when we start to go back into a glacial period, a colder period, that CO2 drops. And you can see from this chart that when temperature rises, after the temperature starts to rise, then CO2 rises. But when temperature drops, CO2 drops. That means that the driving factor for CO2 on our planet is actually temperature. And I just want to say that the majority of CO2 doesn't come from human beings. In fact, not even 1% comes from human beings. The majority of CO2 comes from land and oceans, as it always has done. And because it doesn't make up that much of a gas in our atmosphere, it doesn't change a great deal either. Now I want to show you another chart. So we're looking at another chart here, and if you go on to climate change .nature.gov, I think it is, you'll come across this chart, and this is the one that they're showing. The chart shows changes in global temperature due to all human, natural and total factors or forcings from 1850 to 2017. I want to show you the date range at the bottom of the chart. So this is the website. If you want to go there and have a look, and if you just scroll down, you can come to this. I just want to show you the date there on the bottom of the chart and the range up the left hand column. So we start at 1850 and we end up at 2017, and the range of temperature in changes according to this chart shows 1.23 degrees Celsius. Now on the other chart we was looking at with the glacial and interglacials, remember I said that the critical range from a glacial period to an interglacial, or the starting range, is less than 2 degrees Celsius. And we know that we go into regular patterns of glacial and interglacials over every 100,000 years. So we'll go back into this cycle, and you can see on the other chart that we are obviously returning back into a glacial period where we will begin to experience not just a drop in 2 degrees Celsius, but over a prolonged period of time it will end up being around, on average, for thousands of years, around -8 degrees change. So our temperature on this earth is going to change, and the historical record shows that. And this 1.5 degrees, what they're showing in this chart, is minuscule. What you have to think about, how can this affect us? Well, if we look at the tropical regions and subtropical regions, just going a little bit further above the tropical regions, these are the agricultural, arable, growing, cropping platforms around our world. And not much grows over 50 degrees latitude on our planet. So most of the vegetation and food grows below 50 degrees. And the point is that we are returning back into a glacial period, and that range will start to come down. So, we are already seeing the implications of this, where, farmers can no longer put the same crops in the ground because of the temperatures that have changed. Not only that, the added, hindrance to farmers is the changes in jet streams caused by cosmic rays, creating cloud seeding platforms, which in turn make those jet streams more sluggish and more likely to fracture, where we have polar jet streams mixing with warm tropical jet streams both over northern and southern hemispheres, and this in turn obviously can deliver massive precipitation amounts in record breaking quantities, going back even hundreds of years of historical data based on floods and droughts. Basically it changes everything. But the important point here is, you can see when I bring this to your attention why these corporations don't want me to, and you can see why they cry to the organisations like the United Nations and the European Union to do something about it. And in turn, that legislation has to come from our governments. So we have the organisations like the European Union and United Nations trying to keep their pockets full of money so that they can then in turn silence little websites like mine, little platforms like me from telling the people the truth, so that they can keep pushing and peddling their lies in order to keep their agendas moving forward. They don't really care about the environment, is the truth. They don't care about renewables, and they don't care about anything. They don't really care about us, it seems. All they seem to be cared and concerned about is keeping the wealth in their pockets, and this world is turning to shit as a result of that. We are not seeing them do their jobs as they should do, and that is protecting, if they want to keep a monetary system afloat, protecting jobs. Well, we know that that's not the case, because what we have seen in the technological expansion and explosion over the last 30 years, that all technology has ever done for us is create mechanism, which in turn has taken the jobs away from us. And I want you to just think about one thing I'm about to say. It's the smallest thing. When you go to your local supermarket today and you see less cashiers, more self-serving tills, that means that the jobs are going because of this self-serving till now. And you are seeing more online shops pop up, which means they don't even need to buy a shop, put electric in the shop to run the refrigeration systems in all these shops. They have just a warehouse where all this food is now coming from. And that means less jobs. If you just think about this one little sector, you will see that if this continues, nobody will be able to participate in a monetary system. And what Davos said about us having no money and being happy is going to come true. Only the fact is that I put it to you, have you ever seen anybody homeless that owns nothing with a great big smile on his face and skipping down the road happy? No, it's quite the opposite. What people are more likely to do when they have nothing is try and escape that reality with some sort of substance abuse, which we've as scientists found out, if you subject animals, even animals, to bad environments, you create substance abuse. Now, you would say to me that, well, if that's the case, an animal, like a rat in this case, doesn't have a lot of intelligence, but if you put it in an environment where it's, not very nice, then the rat becomes addicted to substances. Then that means human beings are probably 1,000-fold more likely to do the same because of their level of intelligence. So if you do nothing about these organisations regulating the internet, and if you do nothing about these organisations pushing little channels like mine around and bullying us, stopping you getting access to real information. I'm a real scientist with qualifications. The equipment we've got at this observatory, as I've demonstrated, is there solely for you, but I cannot force you to support this channel. You have to be, in a situation, first of all, where you can help others, and then secondly, you have to be willing to do that. Because I think in this one video, I've taken 20 minutes of your life. If I could have made it smaller, I would have missed out critical information which wouldn't have been able to portray what the truth is of this situation that we are currently in and how important it is. When we disappear, channels like this, you will not get access to this information, and without the information, you will not know what directions to take to benefit yourselves and your future generations, because they will be doomed to further enslavement. So you know why they're coming out after us, you know why it's important to support us, and you have the decision to make. You either carry about your life as it did 20 minutes ago before you heard me, or you start to make changes to stop this suppression and stop these organisations bringing in internet regulations that control us. And if you don't think that they're doing it, then I think that the next screenshot that I show you proves everything I've just told you. And I'm going to do that right now for you. So, first of all, for those that don't know, and I'm pretty sure you all do, the Secretary General is the leader of the United Nations. Have a look at what he said. Secretary General's opening remarks at a press briefing on policy brief on information integrity on the digital platforms. So when they're talking about digital platforms, they're talking about the internet. Listen to what he says. The proliferation of hate and lies in the digital space is causing grave global harm. Now it's fueling conflict, death and destruction. Now it's threatening democracy and human rights. Now it is undermining public health and climate action now. Well, was it somebody talking about CO2 and climate that sparked off what we just saw in Israel? No. Was it CO2 and climate scientists that sparked off the war in the Ukraine with Russia? No. Is it people like me that are supplying arms, sending aircraft carriers to conflict zones to further escalate rather than to de-escalate these situations? It's not me. I don't own Starstreak, nuclear missiles, nuclear submarines or aircraft carriers or F-35 aircraft. I don't own these things. I don't own bullets and I don't own bombs. Yet I am being accused, as well as other people, of conflict, causing conflict and death and destruction and threatening democracy. Is it me that wants to reduce the amount of freedoms of people's ideas and the ability to talk about whatever they want to on alternative climate views? No, it is these people. And these people are running your governments right now. Everything in this statement is 180 degrees away from the exact truth. And they even add at the end of this that it is undermining public health and climate action. We don't need to play about with Mother Nature in any formal fashion because nature is far greater than us. That's why the chosen argument is less than 1 degrees of atmospheric gas that they are saying that's causing these climatic changes. We know that that's not the case. Yet they are coming out after us with these new regulations. And what I wanted to do more than anything else is show you where these regulations are coming from and who they are targeting. Because when we have disappeared all these little platforms like mine, you will not be having somebody like me explain all these things to you in a way that you can understand it, because they will have the full monopoly again, like they had before, over what information you have access to. I just want to bring your attention to what happened in the 1920s and who was suppressing information. It was the Nazis, and they did suppress the information to start with, and then they put people in harm's way, and then it led to the Auschwitz death camp being created, and we know what happened there in that death factory. We are that close. They're suppressing information, and they're doing it to protect not the public's interests, not to protect your local government's interest, but to do only one thing: protect corporate interests. Because we know that the military complex makes bombs, supplies the tanks, the artillery, and without nobody using these things, they're not making money. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to you that we are seeing, wars break out in Israel, in the Gaza Strip, and elsewhere around the world, like in Ukraine and places like that, because wars are good for business, or should I say, wars are only good for one organisation or one corporation. That is the military complexes. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, companies like that. They're the only ones that benefit from war. You know, when we have, pandemics, and they're saying we're going to have more. Of course we're going to have more, because that will fuel the profits of Big Pharma only. It will. These two things cause misery and absolutely benefit us by nothing. And that these organisations' sole commitment to serving is just those corporations, not for the public's interest, not for protecting the public, and certainly not making a better environment for the public. You know, I'm sorry I've had to spend so much time to try and get you to see the truth today, to explain it in a way that you can pick up on what I'm saying. Look, I want to show you just before we go. You can see his comments. This is the leader of the United Nations. This is the guy we're talking about. At the end of this video, you will see this guy. This is the Secretary of the United Nations. This guy is the one that wants to suppress freedoms, democracy. And he wants to support 100% with lies raising of £500 billion, and that will come directly out your pocket with no choice. At least I give you a choice, and I give you the truth. It is only up to you to do what you will with that. You can be a supporter of truth and democracy and freedoms and information, or you can just allow them to just take the money out your wallets whenever they want, for whatever purpose they want. And it's not people like me that are causing death and destruction and misery and climate damage. It's these people that are causing all those things, and yet they have access to your pocket and your wallet and your bank account. So I did my best today to state a case that you should be supporting, platforms like this, and making more of an effort to protecting, the freedoms and a better world for your future generations. You have the right to do that, and you should be thinking about that. I've got only one other thing to say here, that there is a link down there. You can help support us. And I'll tell you now, we should have a lot more than just 178 people supporting us on Patreon right now. We should have literally thousands, but we don't. And we should have more than just 1 or 2 people supporting us on PayPal, but we don't. And as the days go by, we get further suppression by platforms being forced by organisations, corporations to shut us up. So if we do nothing, we will lose our freedoms. And more importantly, we will set the precedents for the freedoms of our future generations to come to be lost also. Guys, there is a link down there. I will say what I always do, you take care of your loved ones. As always, bye for now.